Hi, I'm Steve McCord, Cattaraugus County Director of Veteran Services, and this is Our Veterans, Their Stories, preserving our heroes' stories, one story at a time.
I wanted to serve my country. That was something that was always very proud in my household. I have uncles, and my dad, of course, was in the military. So ever since I can remember, I always wanted to join the military to serve my country. So I went, in high school, I went to talk to the Army recruiter. And when you walk in, all the branches are there, the doors are all there, and everyone was out to lunch except for the Air Force guy. So I went to talk to the Army recruiter and sign up, and instead he was out to lunch, so I joined the Air Force instead. So that's how I ended up in the Air Force.
Where'd they send you for basic?
San Antonio, Texas, for basic.
Tell me about that place.
I thought it was amazing.
Why?
Well, growing up in New York, you just know New York and the weather, and so this is my first time being away from family, right, from upstate New York, and I love the weather, and I love the training, and I don't know, it was just fun. I thought it was fun.
Were you an athlete in high school?
Kind of a mixture.
Yeah.
So yeah, I played sports, soccer. I was also a cheerleader. I did track, but then I also chorus and band and honor society, and I don't know, you name it, everything, I think.
So basic was good for you. You liked basic.
I really enjoyed it. It was a challenge, and it was all about working together, teamwork. So I love being outside and all the obstacle courses, and I don't know. I thought it was fun.
What was the living conditions like? I don't know anything about any of that.
I would call it a dormitory. So you'd have just bunk beds, and all the girls had their dorm and the guys had their dorm, and mass showers. So that was interesting. But yeah, it was just, everything was very structured, and folding your shirts into 6-inch squares, and cleaning. I remember being on our knees with flashlights, cleaning any dust bunnies off the floor with our flip-flops. I just, very tedious things that they make you do to try to, I don't know, get you to work together, I guess.
Well, that's an interesting thought. It's like, is it different number one, is it different in the Air Force? And number two, is it different for females? Is there a breaking down who you are before they build you back up, and what's that look like? Or is there?
Oh, absolutely. So there's a lot of, the drill sergeants and yelling at you, calling you names and that type of thing. And you could tell it really affected some people more than others. I don't know if it's your upbringing or your personality. For me, I got yelled at for smirking. So for me, I don't know. I don't feel that there was a breaking down for me personally. You could physically see it in other girls who didn't handle it very well, ended up washing out. But the way I took it was they stressed you, like put stress on you, whether that's a verbal or physically challenging, in order to make you better and to realize that you have to work as a team in order to succeed. So for me, it was a challenge, and I really enjoyed it. I mean, besides living in separate dorms, I don't know if there was a difference, because you could have the drill sergeants yelling at the guys and then come right over and yell at the girls with the same exact words, drop and give me 20. It was all, I felt like it was the same. So, but from what it's just my view of what I saw.
Well, my sister was Marine, and a big part of her thing was how to wear your hair, how to put on makeup. There was actually a military rule on how a female soldier presented herself versus a male.
Just the hair. The hair had to be up, but that was the only thing. I don't recall being allowed to wear makeup, so at least in basic and training, there was no need for that.
No, she meant that they trained her how how Marine women wear makeup.
Oh, interesting.
So you were never trained in that.
No, no. Your hair had to be up. It couldn't be touching the collar, that type thing. But just the hair.
What about like things that are germane to the Air Force? Were there any like? Did you have to like fly in a plane? Did you have to do anything with planes, or was that not like a part of the whole thing?
No, there's so many other jobs and needs that you don't have to fly in a plane. Very few, I feel like, become pilots.
Yeah.
So.
Did you fire a gun?
Oh yes. Mm-hmm.
Tell me about your training with firearms.
Oh, that's a long time ago. I mean, they teach you how to, how to respect the gun, how to take it apart, how to clean it, how to put it back together. If it gets jammed because of dirt or sand, how to, fix that in the field. Of course, everything's all about safety. So there's a lot of practice, but everything is safety first. So, I mean, just everything you need to know. I thought it was fun. So.
Did you ever have to do guard duty?
No, I was not in a police, like security forces would have done that type of job. So, no, I never did guard duty. So my single biggest failure. Okay, so I went, you do testing, right? There's the ASVAB and then there's testing after that. And then they place you, they give you some options, but they place you in what they feel you might be a good fit at and what you're interested in. So I tested into computer programming because based on my scores, I was like, sure, why not? I had no idea what that meant or even really what that was. So I went to school in Mississippi for the training. And I think it had a 94% or maybe a 96% washout rate, and I was one of those who washed out. So I did not make it through computer programming training, which is okay because it doesn't interest me anyways, but everything happens for a reason. So from there, then they gave me some other choices, and I went into information management instead. So it was files, putting together trainings, putting together different SOPs, standard operating procedures, personnel records, that type of thing. So it just depended on where you were, is kind of like the functions that you did. So administrative, definitely administrative.
Where did you do that at?
My first,
Mississippi.
So the training.
Or you left Mississippi?
Wow, I don't remember. Where did I go for admin training? I actually don't remember.
Well, I wanted to hear about.
That was a long time ago.
What's a New York girl think about being in Mississippi? How'd that work out?
It was good. We went to Mardi Gras. I remember that. So that was interesting, being near water. So it was good. It was fun. It was different. A lot of sand, just different vegetation and humidity.
So you were down near Biloxi? Or?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Biloxi, Mississippi. Mm-hmm.
So okay, school's done. Where's your first? Where'd they put you first?
Kirtland Air Force Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. My first taste of the Southwest, and I loved it. So I'm very outdoorsy. So the weather's amazing. Beautiful mountains, a lot of camping, rock climbing, that type of stuff. So mountain biking. So.
And you were there for how long?
97 to 99, so 2 years, just over 2 years.
And then where did you go?
After that was Korea, so Kutan Air Base in South Korea from 99 to 2000. So, and both of those locations, I was the information management or tech admin. So in New Mexico, I was in a Pavlo squadron, the Jolly Green Giants, the big Pavlos, the helicopters from Vietnam. So that was pretty cool because my office was actually in the hangar on the flight line. So that was more tech admin, obviously taking care of the needs of the flight personnel, and maintenance was down there as well. So it was, again, personnel, administrative, But it kind of had a perk because whenever I had time and done with my duties, I volunteered to help out with the payflows. So like clean them, you know, with the maintenance guys just for fun. So you clean them, and I remember there's a lot of hydraulic fluid leaks. And so you'd clean it up and then you duct tape it. The duct tape is amazing. And then they'd go fly. So, you know, some interesting stories with that. But, so, and, you know, I get to learn other things. I had no maintenance background, but got to do fun things like that. Got to ride on the payloads. And so that was pretty interesting.
Commendation for cleaning and doing stuff with the military planes and helicopters?
Yeah, again, I was just kind of like an adopted maintenance guy just for fun, to learn something different and to see something different. And so, you know, they would have competitions with how well and how quickly they took care of the helicopters. And so I was kind of part of that, even though I wasn't a maintenance guy.
What was, so the guys that you worked with and the machinery that you worked with, what was their jobs in case there was a conflict? What would those machines be doing?
So the payflows, my understanding actually, it was more of a training squadron. So I don't know if there was an actual conflict, if they would utilize them or not. So yeah, my understanding was a lot of just the helicopters would come in and then, you know, we'd take care of them, clean them up. I did very little. Again, I was not a maintenance person, but they'd fix the helicopters, and then the pilots would come out and do training runs around New Mexico and, you know, flying different things. I do know that they did search and rescue sometimes if needed, but I don't know what they would do in a conflict. It was more of a training squadron.
So people were getting flight hours,
Mm-hmm.
flying your stuff. In an all-male situation, what was that like?
I don't know. I thought it was fun. In all of the different places that I was stationed and individuals that I worked with, yes, it was usually only a couple females, but there was a part of me that I didn't feel like I had to prove myself, but I enjoyed the challenge, knowing that I could keep up with the guys, knowing that sometimes I did better than the guys. So it was just it was just a personal thing for me that, hey, I can do this. And I enjoyed it, and it was fun, and learned a lot. So I don't know. It was never demeaning or anything negative. I felt like I was just one of the guys. I don't know. For me, it was, yeah, for me, I didn't have any issues being the only girl. In fact, a lot of them would, you know, kind of come up and give me high fives or be like, dang, Armstrong, you know, you beat me on that, or, you know, whatever. So I don't know. I just felt like one of the guys, and I just felt it was pretty awesome. So a year in Korea. So Kutan is the small base. Osan is the bigger air base that's closer to Seoul. So I believe Kutan was like 3 hours south. So the joke was that if the North Koreans ever attacked, basically Osan would be a speed bump and we'd be the one actual defending. So it was interesting. My job there was information management, tech admin again. So the job was a little bit different though, because the mission was different. So we did have actual offices, but on there we would do a lot of practice getting into mop gear, you know, full outfits, carrying your M16, getting in and out of the the trenches, and just, you know, practicing if there were, you know, some type of attack. It was, I don't know anything necessarily negative. We would play these I can't think of what they were called now. If there was an attack, there was all different like levels, you know, level 1, just depending on what was happening. Was it a bombing? Was it, you know, some like actual people coming on base? So there was just different things that we had to do. And at the end of, and they were usually a week long. So there's a week long that you're wearing mop gear and your mask and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes you're outside, sometimes you're inside, just kind of depends. But I remember at the end of those weeks, they would always play the Lee Greenwood song over the base speakers to where everybody could hear it no matter where you are, you know, proud to be an American. And after those weeks, it would always it would always make me cry. Like not, you know, sobbing, but just because it was such a high alert week of constant, nonstop training and pretend attacks and just different, it was, I don't know, just really got your adrenaline going like all week long. And then by the end of the week, you're just exhausted. And then you hear this song and it just makes you feel so proud to know that you're ready, or you think that you're ready if something were to happen. I mean, they pulled out all the stops. We'd have to put up sea wire. I mean, you name it. It was just all of it. I think one of the worst things, actually, now thinking back, was if you were sick. If you were sick during one of those exercises, you're still wearing your mop gear for hours on end, and people would be like coughing and throwing up and having all types of issues, but you weren't allowed to take your mask off. So, so yeah, it was interesting. I don't know. I think that was, so the mission, obviously, we had the normal day-to-day work that we would do. There we had, it was, I can see it, but I can't remember. F-35s? Dad, do you remember?
What's that?
I don't remember the plane that was there. Oh gosh, I can see the pictures, but I can't remember what it is now. So that one was we had planes, not helicopters. I remember the name of the squadron. They were the Juvats. So whenever I was done with my administrative duties, you know, my off hours, I'd go over, because again, my friends were guys who lived in the barracks or the dorms with us, and we'd go over and we'd get to sit in the the cockpit or whatever, and clean the different instruments and detail the jets. And I don't know, it was just fun, like learning different things that as an information management you would normally not have access to or even be able to touch.
So your JOB was okay, but you like, that was your hobby,
Yeah.
was hanging out, doing that stuff. What about life in Korea itself, off base, you know, what was that?
So I'm half Korean.
Mm-hmm.
And grew up in upstate New York, so didn't know or was not exposed to any of that side of my heritage. So it was very interesting to me to be in Korea for a year. So on the weekends, you know, I was young, so sometimes we would just go party. They had a little area off base. It was called A-Town, so American Town. It's where all the Americans would go and, you know, dance and drink and just have a good time. Dad got to experience that when he came over to visit me. And I have a picture of us in this little dance hall area. And they had these ammo bowls, is what they used to call them. Basically, they throw some ice and a whole bunch of different alcohols in there and put a bunch of straws. And then everyone would drink out of it. So I actually have a picture of Dad and I drinking out of an ammo bowl. Yeah, because it's good memory. So sometimes, you know, we would do the party thing. I like to go downtown and just experience the culture, walking through the different shops, the open markets. That was interesting. The first time I've ever seen dogs
For
sale. Snoopy's laying on the table. Yes, dogs for sale. So in addition to other, you know, fruits and veggies and meats and fish and that type of stuff. So that I tried to experience as much as I could. Didn't speak the language, but would have people come up and try to talk to me, and I just had no idea. I also had my hair very straight at that time, so I looked a little bit more Asian. I did befriend a couple Korean nationals, and one of them worked at the university, and so I was kind of tutoring them in English, which was pretty neat, because I got to learn, you know, more things about real life. downtown. And then also one of the things that the base did was, which I thought was great, was we would go to the orphanages. In Korea, at least at that time, there was I mean, I don't know exactly how it worked, but they didn't necessarily want female babies. So there were a lot of babies that were just given up or sent to the orphanages just because they were a female. So the orphanages had a lot of females, or children that had disabilities. So we would go as a squadron multiple times on the weekends to the different orphanages. And, you know, if it was Christmas, we would bring presents, and, you know, there would be a Santa there. And I have a picture of me, like, you know, handing out presents to these little kids. They were so sweet. We would go there and, again, teach them English. We would play games, and, you know, they would, like, just be crawling all over us because we're different and we sound different. And so that was one of the highlights, I think, trying to immerse myself in the Korean culture that I just didn't know much about. So, and then when Dad came out to visit, so they had this really cool thing, and I don't know if they still do it. It's called like Reunion Korea or something like that, where your family member could come visit you. I don't know if it was a week or 10 days. I had to take leave for this.
I was over there 12 days.
Okay, but I think you were there a day or two on the end. I can't remember how that worked, but yeah, it was at least, you know, 7 to 10 days. And so I took leave, and then Dad came to visit, and then, you know, I got to show him the whole base and what we were doing and where I worked. But what was really cool is we got on these big tour buses, and then we toured around different parts of South Korea, and we went to, I didn't even know they had a Sheraton there at one of the cities that we went to, and they would throw these big banquets at night with ice sculptures and the traditional Korean dancers and drummers, and, you know, they put a whole show on, and then you would have this amazing dinner. There was at least 2 of those. It's hard to remember, but so we got to visit, you know, the temples and different historic places in South Korea. So it was pretty neat. I think that was really great having Dad over there, because he was stationed there how many years before that? 25-ish? 74 to 76. And so I was there 99 to 2000. So yeah, about 25 years.
The DMZ.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. We went to the DMZ, which was, I don't know. It's one of those places that makes the hair on your arms stand up, just to know the history of like what happened there and why it's there. And then they actually had pictures on the wall of something about the tree and Camp Bonifast and the individual. I don't know the whole story. I can't remember the story, but cutting down the tree so that we could see better. And then I think the person was killed by the North Koreans. And so to see that and to know that history, and then you could look across the DMZ, and they had, I think it was called Propaganda Village. So it had all these little shacks or huts and signs that I couldn't read. And then they would play, I guess it's propaganda, you know, whatever it is, against the Americans, whatever they're saying. So that was interesting. But they also had this one, you know, because my understanding is it's a minefield, like there's still a lot of mines and things that are out there, so it's dangerous. But they did have this one, it wasn't a house, but a building that actually crossed the line. So this part of the building, like this large room, was in South Korea, and that part was North Korean, and there was a really long table in the middle, and you were allowed to walk around the table. So technically you're in North Korea, and then walk back, and they had Korean soldiers standing there on both ends, right? You couldn't touch them. Yeah, they wouldn't talk, they didn't move. I mean, they looked like statues if you didn't know they were real people. But it was interesting. So technically you could walk into North Korea and back. So I think I have some pictures of that. So. I competed for a scholarship, so I got a full ride. So I got a command leadership scholarship as I got out for being enlisted. And I had also just made staff select too. So I was a senior airman, I tested and made staff, but I never actually pinned it on because I got out. I took the Command Leadership Scholarship. It was a full ride, so I did not have to use my GI Bill at that time. So it was full ride. I had already done about 1 year of credits, just taking night classes, just, because I like to stay busy. So I'd already taken a year of college taking random night classes, mostly in New Mexico. And I think I did one online when I was in Korea, but I only had to go to college for 3 years, and I could go to any of the colleges as long as I stayed in the U.S. And so I chose Flagstaff, NAU, because I absolutely fell in love with the Southwest, the weather and the outdoors, and just loved it when I was stationed in New Mexico. So when I got out of the military, I drove myself cross country with my Python. I had a snake at the time, and and camped out at Fort Tuthill, which is just south of Flagstaff in Arizona, until I found a place to live and started college on the Command Leadership Scholarship. Also, at the same time, I was doing ROTC. So I did 3 years at NAU doing ROTC as well, and I had a job. And in 2004, I graduated with my bachelor's in criminal justice and a minor in psychology. And then, because I'm a glutton for punishment, I went back into the military as an officer. And I competed and got into OSI. So I was a special agent with the Air Force Office of Special Investigations. So I went back in as an officer, but because we were special agents, right, and you don't want anyone to know your rank, we actually never wore uniforms. Because you don't want people to know, are you enlisted or are you the commander, right? So we always wore civilian clothes. Top secret SEI clearance. So a lot of the things that we did I can't mention, but I can talk in general about different things. I just haven't talked about any of this. Let's see here. So I graduated college, and my base, I was stationed at F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming. So Cheyenne, Wyoming. It is known as a missile base, and there's a lot of security forces there, so Air Force security forces. We were Detachment 8, and there was only, how many agents were there? 6 of us, 6 or 7 of us? Not very many of us. The base is beautiful, by the way, if you ever get a chance to go up there, because it's the old, I think, colonial builds, the stone, and even the housing and just everything on there. It's absolutely a beautiful, historic base. But Cheyenne, Wyoming, not a lot up there. It's a missile base, though, and it covers a few different states. The silos that are underground that people wouldn't even know they're there, right? So I didn't actually guard them. That wasn't my job. Security forces. So most of the airmen on base were security forces. They would do guard duty, for hours in the middle of nowhere. You didn't even know there was a missile silo there. So there was a lot of, unfortunately, you have young teenagers as security forces. They're stationed, they're guarding these holes in the ground, and there's nothing to do. So they got in trouble quite a bit with each other. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things going on. I don't know if we necessarily had who our bad guys were. It was, the military is a cross section of society, right? We have our good apples and we have our bad apples. It's the same. It's just, we have a different mission, and we have to be a little stricter with what you can and cannot do. And so a lot of our cases, the security forces themselves, they also have their own investigators. They would take care of the lower level cases. For OSI, we handled felony level. So it had to rise to something that was actually, a felony or higher, depending on what it is. So a lot of the little fights and things that, that they would get into, we didn't handle. We handled pretty much everything else. So if there was there was a death on base. We had a lot of suicides. You know, so we'd be called for those type of things, and we'd have to, you know, we did it all because we were such a small detachment. We'd come to the crime scenes and we would have to back and tag evidence, take the pictures, draw the scene, do the measurements, you know, investigate. So obviously you have to, you know, after you've secured the scene and talked to witnesses and, you know, everything, fingerprint, like you name it, we did it. You know, it's like what you see on TV. It doesn't happen in 60 minutes with commercials though. So I feel like a lot of the calls that we got were after hours. 4 o'clock on a Friday, you think you're going home. Not so much, you know, so we would work a lot of hours, just kind of depending on what was happening. So that was part of the job, you know, filling in level crimes that happened on base. I myself, I had other cases such as multi-billion-dollar fraud cases, you know, DoD contractors maybe not doing what they're supposed to be doing with funds and whatnot. So I had fraud cases that I was working. We did a lot of collaboration with other 3-letter agencies. I did a lot with ATF, and it just kind of depended on the case. We had one of
3-letter agencies, ATF, FBI, yeah, I'm sitting here going,
yeah. Not CIA. I did not work with the CIA at any point in time, but the other, yeah, FBI. Yep, you got it. Let's see here. One of the bigger things that was rather new, at least to that area or, you know, to that location, that I became the liaison with our local, the Cheyenne local PD, and they had ATF agents and just different things. It was called peer-to-peer networking. So it was working to catch people with child pornography. So we did a lot. I actually had an office downtown and on base. So I was like the liaison between the Air Force and for that base and the local law enforcement agencies. And, you know, we would, your computer skills kind of come into play. There's a lot of different things that I can't mention, but peer-to-peer networking is what it was called. And, you know, you hear the stories of, you know, going online and pretending that you're a kid or, you know, whatnot. And so you set up these meets and send pictures. You know, we don't send pictures, but you know what I mean? Like, we do a lot of like working, trying to figure out where the IP addresses, where they're coming from, and you build a case. You play that game and you build the case, and then at some point you can, usually not all the time, but try to catch them, figure out where they are. And we busted a good number of airmen with child pornography, and then you'd have to go to their dorm or their house or whatever and, you know, bag and tag all that evidence and just, yeah. So again, cross-section of society, not great. I think the biggest case that I was able to work on was we busted a chief who was close to retirement. And he had a lot. His house was, I don't know, stuff like that. And you see so much, right? Because you have to verify the images. And as an agent, you had to testify in court. What did you see? Describe to me the video. What IP address? How did you find it? You know, all that kind of stuff. So you kind of relive some of that.
Have you had to carry that with you?
Sorry, this is why I don't talk about it. So again, as a kid, I don't know, there were 3 things that I always wanted to do when I grew up. I always wanted to serve my country in the military. I always wanted to work for the FBI, and I always wanted to join the Peace Corps. And those are still, I did 2 of them. Peace Corps, I'm hoping, is something I can do after I retire. And see what kind of service I can provide there. But so competing for OSI was, kind of along the same lines as the FBI. And when I went to college, I competed cross country to get an internship with the FBI. So, and they chose like, I think one person per state or something, however that worked. But so when I was in college, going to college and doing ROTC, I competed for this scholarship, and I went to DC and worked with the FBI at the Behavioral Science Unit for, I think it was like 3 months. Was it 3 months approximately?
Right about that.
One summer. And, so you got to experience kind of what the FBI is all about and see a lot of different things, shoot the guns, Hogan's Alley. Went to the ME, saw so many different, dead bodies and what they, how they take them apart and look for things. And we did a lot of computer work, and I actually gave a seminar to head law enforcement agencies across the country. Came and I did a presentation to them about gangs and different things. So it was a really interesting 3 months. So I did get to work with the FBI. It was a paid internship, so I could say that I worked with the FBI, right? So I don't know, that the crime, getting criminals off the street and just try to figure out why are they doing that or what are they doing, how can we stop them? I don't know, that's very intriguing to me. So I got to work with the FBI, and so that kind of was one of the reasons why I was like, oh, I think OSI would be right up my alley. So you had to also compete for that. Special agents, and not, it's not something you can just, hey, I want to do that. So there's a lot of competition. But yeah, it just kind of fit with what I was interested in, and again, I got a criminal justice background, so. Yeah, like I said, you have a lot of young security forces, and they are bored out of their mind just watching a hole in the ground. And so they get into trouble. There was also a lot of fun stuff that we got to do. For example, I went to an undercover agent course in Georgia. So before you actually go to be an agent, you actually go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, where there's like 80 different law enforcement agencies that train at this location in Georgia. And so you go there first to get all this training, and that means everything. It's from, weapons to erratic driving. Got to drive, the cars and J-turns and all that kind of stuff. So you learn all of that stuff. But I went back there to become an undercover agent. And I only got to use it a little bit because then I ended up getting out early. But we ran sources, so people who would give us information and we'd run with it. So I did some kind of undercover work with drugs, going into the bars and finding out what airmen were selling drugs or buying drugs. I had to go to like the strip clubs in the area, do that type of, just kind of, again, undercover, getting information, who we were building a case on. There was issues with, one of the security forces was selling ballistic vests, the military ballistic vests, and drugs and different things to people who shouldn't have it. So we had, those type of cases as well. You're just wearing civilian clothes, and you just try to befriend whoever the target is and get to know them, get information.
Were
Just
you
kind
a
of
drugger too? I mean,
No,
were you
like
supposed
I
to be a drugger?
no. We didn't know that you don't cross that line. So
Okay.
that's it. You practice scenarios in training, like what to do if something like that happens. But no, you don't. I didn't have to do any of that. But you come up with, you have a whole backstory. So you have to have a whole cover, and you have to know. And one thing that they taught you is that you come up with a different name, right? But you always keep your first name. Because if someone else happens to know you and sees you out when you're undercover trying to get information, and they say your name and they call you by a different name, well, you're blown, it's just not going to work that way. So I had a whole pseudo where I came from and, my name, you change your last name and you just have this whole story that you have to know. And you act a little bit differently depending on the situation, right? So it just kind of depends. I mean, I can't go in there being law enforcement. You can't act like law enforcement, right? You don't want to look like law enforcement. So it's interesting. It's almost like an acting gig or something where you just have to not be yourself.
Well, I think that's what I was trying to get at. I didn't want you to be a drugger, but did you have to skank yourself? It's like, did you have to skank yourself up to be, like to actually look like a real customer that this is,
Well, one thing to keep in mind too is that my cases were, I was only ever investigating military individuals, right? So they might be dealing drugs or doing drugs, but they're not they're not like homeless people on the street, they don't, so I wouldn't have to, make myself up or anything. I just would wear like normal clothes, like party clothes. You're a young female out to party, nothing crazy, nothing too crazy, but you just wanted to act like a local, again, not law enforcement. You don't want to ask questions that would kind of tip them off. So you just kind of have to be careful, like what you say and how you act. And I mean, I don't know, to be honest, it was kind of easy because guys are dumb. No offense, but like young guys, like young girls, like showing attention, like it was easy.
Do you know your little girl was doing this?
At the time. It wasn't hard. I mean, these are just,
You know what? You're absolutely right. We aren't that. Jerry Seinfeld once said, in his comedy routine, why do we whistle at women? Because that's the best we could come up with.
yeah, I mean, and these are young airmen that are just doing bad things. So it just wasn't hard to catch them. Got out in 2007. I got a job with Kroll, which is basically contracted with OPM to do background security investigations. So I was a special investigator. So, those top secret or SCI clearances that I had in the military, I was doing those background investigations for people who needed those now. So now I was contracted through them. So that I went to training and then I moved to Phoenix, Arizona, and I was able to do that remotely because they send you anywhere they need to be. So I was working out of Phoenix, but they would send us to Salt Lake City all the time to conduct investigations up there. So a lot of it, you have to go to the neighborhood, right? The neighborhood of this person and talk to all their neighbors. What kind of person what did they do? That type of thing. And then you'd have to go locally to law enforcement checks and go to the courthouses or whatever it may be. So they would just kind of send us where they needed us. They sent me to Hawaii for 6 weeks, I think. I mean, that was a tough one. But yeah, they gave me a house and a car right on the beach. That was a real tough one. So that was, special investigations. And then we wanted to get into, when I say we, my husband, I met him in undercover. So we were both special agents in the military. I was in Wyoming, he was in New Jersey, but we both went to the undercover special agent course in Georgia, which is where we met. So we met in the military. We have similar backgrounds. And then he ended up getting out the year before I got out or so. And then we both did the special investigations, special investigator with Kroll. And then we wanted to get into the government, and a good foot into that was working for the VA. So we both worked for the VA. There's nothing wrong with not only, knowing your benefits, but helping other veterans know their benefits. And so we kind of, yes, tried to help my dad a lot. He doesn't listen sometimes, do ya? But so we did that for a year, and then we got it with EEOC. So now I'm with EEOC. I've been with them for 13 years.
Is it economic?
Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So investigating discrimination in the workplace. So I was investigator for 6 years with them. With the EOC, it's a small federal agency, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. So, if anyone feels like they're discriminated against, being treated unfairly because of a protected basis, their sex, their national origin, their race, their disability, pregnancy, those type of things, all of the things that are covered under the Title VII and ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, ADEA, the age. So I did that for 6 years as an investigator, and then I promoted into mediation, and that's what I currently do now. So it's been over 7 years as a mediator, a federal mediator with the EEOC. So I mediate cases where employees or potential employees or former employees feel like they've been treated wrongfully in the workplace, and I help the employee or former employee negotiate some type of resolution with the employer. And I'm neutral. I'm not on either side, but I do negotiations. They're usually anywhere from 3 to 5 hours long at a time, and it's a lot of listening and helping the parties kind of agree to disagree on their perspectives of what happened, whatever the incidents are, and then come to a resolution, which is usually money. It could be $5,000, it could be $100,000, $500,000, just kind of depends. But I negotiate anything that the parties are interested in. Sometimes it's not money, sometimes it's they want training, or they want a transfer, or a different supervisor, different location. I've negotiated cars, baby diapers, food, you name it. So sometimes, in order to resolve the issues, the parties, sometimes something of value to the charging party, the person that actually filed the charge and feels discriminated against. Sometimes it's, most of them want money, but sometimes there's products and services of the company that could be of value to the charging party that's not money. So, for example, there was a company that sold baby items. She was pregnant. She was terminated while she was pregnant. She feels like her termination was due to her pregnancy, which obviously is protected basis and illegal. Whether or not we can prove it, who knows, but that's how she felt. That's what she perceived. And so her charge was based on those allegations. The employer didn't want to put a lot of money on the table, but they gave her baby diapers instead, like a year's worth of diapers. So it's very random. Every day is different, and people have different things that could be of value to them, right? It could be products and services of the company instead of money. So I help the parties negotiate some type of resolution in order to close that charge. So it doesn't go into investigations. The investigation on these discrimination cases can take 2, 3, 4 years. And then if they wanted to go to court, it could be 3, 4, 5 years after that. It's a very long process. Our justice system is a very long, sometimes not fair process. So mediation is before there's any investigation, to try to resolve early and get something. Something now is better than nothing later. It's kind of how I feel about it. So, yeah, but everything's voluntary. It's voluntary, it's confidential. And if it doesn't work, then they just go into investigations. So.